He's Gonzalo Lira, and he joins me now. I don't know quite how to put it in words, Gonzalo, but welcome back.
Thank you very much, George, and sorry I was a no-show last week. Hello, do you hear me?
A funny thing happened to you on the way to the studio.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. Listen, before I say anything else, yesterday I saw finally because I'd heard about it. I saw the incredibly the wonderful statement you made when I didn't show up to your program last Sunday. And I want to commend you and thank you so much for the moral clarity of your statement. Because a lot of people would have said, oh, a guest didn't show up and that's that. And, fingers crossed, and just would have changed the subject. But I so appreciated the fact that you shone a strong spotlight on my situation. Because I truly believe, George, and I want you to know this, I truly believe that your attention to my particular case made a huge difference to the outcome. And I want you to know that. And and I'm glad that this is public so that everybody can hear what I'm saying. Because it truly,
well, that's most kind. Most kind of you, Gonzalo.
Yeah.
I thank God for it myself, but that's just me. But I think you should know that thousands of people, thousands and thousands around the world, were praying either religiously or secularly for your safekeeping and for your release. Are you able to tell us? Perhaps you're not. We won't judge you if you're not. Are you able to tell us what happened?
Yes, but before I do that, I just want to thank all those wonderful, wonderful people who sent good wishes to me and who were praying and worrying for me. I thank you so much. And there was a wonderful woman who was on your show just now, a woman named Corinne. And I want to thank her,
yes.
Just as much as I would thank anyone, because I could hear in her voice how worried and concerned she was for my well-being. And it's so humbling. And I thank her and I thank everyone else listening. But I do want to point out something. I'm extremely fortunate, but there are other people who are not so fortunate. For instance, Julian Assange. For instance, the people who have been jailed because of the so-called January 6th riot. Some of the people who were in the Canadian convoy who have been jailed and their livelihoods and their savings stripped from them, stolen from them by the state. There are a lot of people who are suffering a lot of injustices in the West. And I thank you so much for your concern for me. And I'd ask you very humbly to redirect that concern to other people in our society, in the collective West, who are suffering under the yoke of these illegitimate regimes that are supposed to be our leaders, that are supposed to represent us, but represent the moneyed interests, the Western oligarchs. And do keep in mind, George, I have never made any bones about it. I am a man of the right. I'm a center-right person. I am not a person of the left, certainly not a socialist or a communist. But the people in charge, who are in control in the West, are corrupt oligarchs that we should be doing something about. And their hideous disregard for the common decencies and the natural rights that we have all, that we are heirs to, it is destroying the civilization of the West. It is destroying democracy and all that is good and decent of the Western civilization. And I would ask everyone of every political stripe to, acknowledge this fact and try to work against these oligarchs who are crushing the spirit out of our wonderful civilization that has built up so much, but is now so rapidly falling apart. Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm ranting, but it's something that I really wanted to get off my chest.
No, it's a powerful statement. So what happened to you on your way to the studio?
Well, I'll tell you, on Friday, April 15th, at about 1:20 in the afternoon, eight uniformed and heavily armed members of the SBU, the Ukraine State Security Services, appeared at my door and they wanted to get in. And beyond that, I am in Ukraine, as you know. I am in Kharkov. I am, of course, under the jurisdiction of the legal authority in Ukraine. And therefore, according to Ukraine law, I cannot discuss what happened once they had come in and taken me into custody. So I cannot, and I signed documentation that avowed that I understood my obligation. And until this criminal process is complete, I cannot discuss it in any detail. Of course,
I understand.
Yeah, just to make it clear,
I understand, and I wouldn't want you to get into any trouble. But you were never physically harmed.
The important thing is that I'm not charged with any kind of espionage or any kind of sedition or anything of the sort. And we will see how this process moves forward. Now, I do believe that the attention...
Can you tell us about Kharkov? Can you tell us what's happening in Kharkov, which has now become the front line?
Well, not quite. The front line is really closer to the Donbass, which is about 150 kilometers from here. That's where the real action is happening, and it is a tragedy because the West and everybody and the mainstream media and the propagandists in the mainstream media are convincing everyone that the Ukrainians will win, that they will, save the day and push out the Russians and invade Russia, take it over. These are daydreams.
Don't touch your mic, Gonzalo. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, sorry about that. For all their bravery, the wonderful soldiers of the Ukrainian armed forces, I want to make it clear, this is not a value judgment. This is a realistic assessment of the situation. For instance, if I were to step into the boxing ring with, say, Conor McGregor, I hope that I would win, of course, but realistically, I know that Conor McGregor would wipe the floor with me in about 10 seconds because that's the reality of the situation. Okay, so this is not an issue of what I wish or hope for, but rather a realistic assessment. And the realistic assessment is that potentially thousands, if not tens of thousands of wonderful, brave Ukrainian soldiers might perish needlessly because the political regime, the Zelensky regime, that is just the puppets of Victoria Nuland and Anthony Blinken and that corrupt cabal in Washington, well, they are obliging him to continue a war that cannot be won. It is as simple as that. And it is a tragedy. It's horrible. And I do not wish this to happen because I love Ukraine. I wouldn't be living here if I didn't like it. And I have the opportunity to live in any country in the world. And I like living in Ukraine. It's a wonderful country filled with wonderful people, decent, hardworking people who are always kind and always with a smile. But the reality of what has happened is the Zelensky regime goaded the Russians into this war, and they have discovered that the Russians were not kidding. They were not fooling around. And the things that have happened is that as this war has progressed, as the Russians have invested more and more energy, more men, more material, more psychological chips, it's clear that at the end of this, the Ukrainian nation will be torn asunder. And the only thing that we can do at this point is to try to end this senseless war in order to save the lives of these brave young men, because no one would ever question their bravery, their valor. But like I said before in my analogy with me stepping into the ring with Conor McGregor, you have to realize your limitations. You have to realize that sometimes guts, valor, bravery, they are simply not enough. And it is a tragic thing, but it has to be faced realistically like adults. And George, I can't tell you how much it breaks my heart to see these young men who are going to lose their lives and their babies. I mean, I'm a 54-year-old man. I don't want to ask, how old you are, but I assume you're roughly my age. And, you and I, we middle-aged men, we look at a boy of 20 and we see a child with his whole life ahead of him, a 20, 25-year-old boy. And yes, strong and energetic, but we see all of the life ahead of him. And to see that wonderful promise be cut short for nothing except the ego of the Zelensky regime, the terror of the fascist thugs around him. And I say this knowing exactly what I'm speaking of. I'm not saying that they're like, oh, they're slightly right-wing, therefore they're fascist. No, I'm talking about real neo-Nazis around Zelensky who are puppeteering him. They are true fascists, and they are terrified of the Russians with good reason, because the Russians have said publicly that, that they are going to get those guys. And so they are prolonging this war in order to save their hides like rats. And Victoria Nuland in Washington, she wants to prolong this, fight this war to the last Ukrainian, because she and her whole corrupt cabal in Washington think that by prolonging this war, it hurts the Russians somehow. And it won't really, not really, because the Russians have this very firmly in hand. They are winning this war. And this is a hard reality that has to be faced. And in the West, nobody wants to face it. On the contrary, they keep on dreaming up some weird notions that they can achieve victory. There is no victory to be won. There will only be death and suffering of innocent people. And this is something that has to be prevented. And people have to tell their elected representatives, tell people that there is nothing to be won at this point. It's over. And the tragedy is that the longer this goes on, the worse it will be for the innocent, for the young men who are fighting and who will lose their lives or be horribly maimed, for the civilians who will inadvertently be caught in the crossfire, because this always happens in every war. It has to end as soon as possible. And that's my hope and prayer, quite frankly. Because the situation...
Well, very powerful soliloquy, Gonzalo, I must say. Now, just before we leave you for now, and I hope we'll talk to you regularly, if nothing else, just to see how you are. We know that there have been some problems with your social media. So what is the exact place where we should follow you from this moment on?
Well, thank you very much for asking. At this time, what happened was that the SBU investigators took my phone and they changed the passwords on all of my accounts. And so therefore, I do not have access to my old YouTube channels or anything else, my Telegram channels, anything. The only thing I have at this time is Twitter. Twitter, it's Gonzalo Lira 1968. All one word, Gonzalo Lira 1968. And that's my official Twitter handle. And that's where I'm going to be from now on. Do keep in mind that I'm back just 2 days ago. And so that's all I've been able to organize at this time. But through that focus, that point of entry, I will organize a new YouTube channel and start producing YouTube content and get back up on my feet, because I want people to know what's going on. And also what's happened is that because of the situation, I've gotten a great deal of attention, which is incredibly flattering. But I think it would be worthwhile for me to use this attention to put the spotlight on a lot of different people who have a lot to contribute to the conversation, to people understanding the situation, not just in this issue of Ukraine, but also in the issue of the mismanagement of our civilization by our current leaders, we in the West, in Europe is going to go hungry by the end of this year. You know, George, that I used to write financial blogs because I've been in finance. I grew up around finance. My family has been in finance since forever. And so I know what has happened. The European Union, in trying to punish Russia, has shot itself not in the foot, they've shot themselves in the gut. And Europe is slowly bleeding out. And come September, there will be food shortages. I mean, forget about energy shortages. There are going to be rolling blackouts by September. And this coming winter, the winter of 2022, 2023, is going to be horrible in Europe, in what is supposed to be the richest continent on the face of the planet. And it's all because of the incredible mismanagement and the incredible vindictiveness of the European leadership towards Russia. And of course, if you kick somebody and you kick them and kick them and kick them, finally they're going to kick back. The Russians have kicked back, and they have only even started when they decide finally by September to end the gas supply to Europe, which they will, because the long-term contracts with Gazprom are ending. They're starting to end. I do believe in August and throughout the rest of the end of the year, the long-term contracts are going to start to end, and the Russians will not sell any more gas to the Europeans. The Europeans keep threatening to sanction Russia and saying that, oh, we're not going to buy your gas anymore. The thing is, they don't seem to realize that, the gas is the raw material that Europe needs, because the Russians have other customers for their gas. They have the pipelines running to China and Southeast Asia. They don't need Europe. Europe needs Russia. And they're going to find out how much they need them when they go cold and hungry by the end of the year. And this is going to drag down the United States too. The American listeners who are listening to this, I'm here to tell you, this is not a European problem. This is a global West problem. This is Europe, the UK, Canada, America, Australia, New Zealand, even parts of Central and South America are going to be hit by this. And it is going to be a disaster. And we are going to see migrations from Africa and the Middle East that are going to dwarf anything that happened in 2014 and 15. We are going to see tens of millions of people migrating from Africa, from the Middle East, because of food scarcity. You have to keep in mind something. Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan control 40% of the global wheat export market. 40%. And do keep in mind, in 2011, during the Arab Spring, which started off because of high food prices, why were there high food prices? Well, because Russia had a slightly bad harvest because of inclement weather. It was slightly bad, and it caused the chaos of the Arab Spring. Imagine Ukraine, the breadbasket of Europe, one of the richest soils on the planet, one of the major providers of wheat in the global markets. It has postponed the planting. Roughly half the fields in Ukraine at this time have not been planted. So you're going to have at least half of the regular grain supply from Ukraine going to the rest of the world. How do you think that's going to affect the Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa? It is going to be a disaster. And so I'm telling people now, get ready. And if you're smart, and I hate to sound like Chicken Little, the sky is falling, but this time it really is falling. Buy food now while you can.
It is.
Yes.
Buy food now. I'm taking that advice. Gonzalo Lira, stay safe and stay in touch. And everyone, please follow Gonzalo Lira 1968.